on tonight with Jessica of How to ADHD. Everybody say welcome, welcome, welcome.
Oh, they said hello, brains. Hello, brains.
Oh, cute! Oh my gosh, because KS Girl knows. I had so many people get so excited to hang out with you. So I'm really excited to, obviously. I mean, I was excited to have you here on before, but then people were like, "Oh my God!" Somebody said, actually, I think it was last episode. They're like, "You have to have Jessica on." I was like, "Okay,
Oh.
no problem. We'll have Jessica on." And coincidentally, next episode, and yeah, so here we are. Hi.
Oh.
Hello, 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 everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
So, Em, you have to teach me where to look. Am I supposed to look at you or am I supposed to look at the camera?
I think that's up to you. When you look at the camera, it looks like you're looking at me. Like your brain
Okay.
gets tricked into thinking you're looking in the right place.
I'm gonna look at the camera.
Yeah, but if you like want to look at, like, I'll also turn around and look at you, and then for the viewers, that looks like I'm talking to you directly. Like,
Okay.
yes, I definitely.
All right.
Which is weird because I'm just looking at myself actually because of where this is located on my screen. But anyway, yeah. So it's up to you what you want to do. Honestly.
Yeah.
Stare into
the camera,
ourselves.
then I'll also read the chat because wow, you have a lot of people. That's exciting.
It is exciting. It is exciting, and everybody's saying hello. And so this is kind of semi-interactive. If somebody like asks a question that we really need to pull in, we will. But the whole idea is for us to have like, it's as conversational as it gets. Don't feel like it needs to be like question answer. So
Okay.
and
I'm not being tested. That's
no,
good.
you're definitely not being tested. And also, it's definitely an environment where, like, if another question comes up that makes sense, like, I'm just going to ask it because that's how conversations work. So.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. Thanks for explaining to me how conversations work.
Yes.
I am very tired after
I'm here to explain to you how Mixer works, how conversations work, anything else you need. Breathing, I have a 101 course on that you could take through Coursera anytime. So thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so it sounds like some of you guys already know who I am. Hello. If you've been watching my channel, awesome. If you have no idea who I am or why Em is talking to me, I am Jessica from How to ADHD. It's a YouTube channel. It was my online toolbox. Basically, I kept coming across things that I thought were really helpful, or little bits of knowledge or strategies for my ADHD that then I would promptly lose or forget about and not use, and then I just kept failing at life. So I was like, why don't I collect them someplace that I would never like lose them? I would actually be able to find them again. And I was like, what will I never lose? I know how to get to YouTube. I will always be able to get to YouTube. So I'm the creator and host of How to ADHD, the YouTube channel.
That's amazing. That's so beautiful. So can you give us a little bit of background? Like, when were you diagnosed and when did you figure out? Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
that's an interesting thing. I was diagnosed actually at 12.
Oh, okay.
I was diagnosed with ADHD, and like a lot of girls, I was only diagnosed because a boy was diagnosed. My cousin was like, the stereotypical like bouncing off the walls troublemaker, full of energy. And meanwhile, I was like in a corner reading my book and just getting distracted and losing everything, and nobody really worried about me until he got diagnosed, and then his doctor was like, looked at my aunt and was like, I think you might have it too. And she was so much like me that when I started struggling really in school, in middle school, when like suddenly you're responsible for bringing your own books to class and switching classes, and there's just a lot more to keep track of, I really started struggling. And then, all the emotional fun roller coasters that come with puberty are like amplified when you also have that emotional dysregulation of ADHD. So, I was losing everything and not making it to class on time and screaming at my mom and telling her I hated her. And my mom was like, we should maybe see if there's something going on here. So she took me to a doctor, and he was like, well, how'd she do in elementary school? And my mom was like, well, she got straight A's. And he was like, she can't have ADHD. And my mom was like, thank you for your opinion. We'd like to talk to an expert. And so we went and got me properly evaluated. And sure enough, ADHD. I mean, at the time it was ADD, but now it would be considered ADHD. I have combined type, the combined presentation now.
Oh boy, you poor thing.
So you know what that means. I qualify for both.
Well, so wait, give us a background. So what is each? There's three types. There's three predominant
presentations.
Types.
Yeah, and they call it presentations because they're starting to be aware of the fact that ADHD symptoms can kind of change over the years. So when I was younger, nobody would have ever called me hyperactive, but as I got older, I started, the impulsivity really started coming out. And for other people, they'll be super hyperactive as kids, but then as adults, that kind of goes away. They learn strategies, or, just enough people, I guess, yelled at them or whatever. It kind of turns into an internal restlessness. So ADHD presents differently for different people and also over time. So they call it presentations now. And there's 3 now in the current DSM, which is primarily inattentive presentation. And then there's the primarily hyperactive impulsive. And then there's me, which is a combination of both.
Got it. Oh, okay, I'm gonna milk you for all the juicy knowledge that I could possibly
get.
get.
Ask me anything.
So because I was diagnosed with ADHD just very recently, so all of my knowledge kind of ends in. Does it explain some things? I don't know, right?
I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it just recently, like literally last year, because somebody had brought up that I think you have borderline personality disorder, and I was like, that doesn't really make sense, but I think you're onto something with like it's not just depression and anxiety there.
Right.
And so yeah, I took a test, and here we are.
Well, welcome to the tribe.
Yeah. Oh, it's pretty fantastic. Be like knowing it, like I feel like my entire childhood is now explained, like all the time, because I was the typical like lose everything, why can't you just seem to get it together kind of kid that like all the like my mom just never understood why I couldn't be whatever XYZ.
Why can't you just?
Yes. Yeah. Why can't you just, including sit still? Yeah, of course. Yeah. So it's really I'm really excited to meet you from like I feel like your videos have helped me a bunch too. But I should be asking you questions that the audience wants to hear. You guys, by the way, exclamation and the letter Q if you guys have a question, and we will get to them towards the end. So thank you so much. Okie dokie. I'm opening it. So when did you first? So you kind of were diagnosed through your aunt and something being wrong there. But did you ever think like, oh no, something is wrong with me, or like I'm not like all the other kids, or did that ever come up?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that I was different. I knew I was weird. I knew that I didn't behave the way that the other kids behaved, and I knew, growing up in elementary school, I was at the same school, and it was this private school, and all the kids were, the same class, going year to year. And by the time I got to 6th grade, I knew my social status. I knew I was the second least popular kid in class. Oh. And my self-esteem was already pretty bad around that. Like, I knew that I came home without my jacket half the time. I knew that I couldn't pay attention to things unless they interested me. But I was lucky in that I was really interested in reading. Pizza Hut had this really great program. Were you part of that? Like,
no, I did the Zany Brainy summer reading program.
Okay, so I had, there was something at my local library that was really cool, but there was also like the Pizza Hut, like I always had a button, and then like every time you read a book you get like a star or whatever. And so like I got real into reading real fast, and my parents spent a lot of money on pizza for the rest of the family, because what I didn't realize at the time is every time I got a free little personal pizza because I'd read 5 books, everybody else did not get free pizza. So
right.
My parents like buy that. So Pizza Hut knew what they were doing, but it got me very into pizza and books. So I was really into reading, really into learning. And so I was so engaged with that. And I had a lot of structure and support. And so academically I was fine. And I was also considered a gifted student. But yeah, socially, super awkward. Knew that I did not fit in, but I made friends through books. Like I would read books and they would be my friends. All the characters in books would be my friends. And so it wasn't really an issue until middle school, where I was like, oh, like it's not cool to read anymore. Apparently like you're supposed to know how to do things like dance and have conversations.
That was one of the things. Why can't you just read less? That was the thing for
really?
me too. So yeah, no, it was if you read less, you'd have more friends. That was the consistent message that I got at home.
Wow.
That's a different problem, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the same was true for me, but I don't think anybody minded that I read, because they were like, she's smart though. Like, that's good. That's a good thing. But I really do think every once in a while somebody should have been like, can you put the book down? Like, I would walk and read. Like, I would sit at the dinner table and read. I would, like, no matter where we went, I had a book with me. And I think it was a way of avoiding what was, really uncomfortable social interactions, where I didn't know what was expected of me. And like, I couldn't, I don't know. I was immature in a lot of ways. I didn't
Mm.
respond the same way my peers did, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff would make me cry easier. And I think it was just a way of escaping all of that.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so what was your favorite? Tell me about, because I know readers, we have favorite books in like different stages of life. So tell me about those. I know this is a bonus question, but I have to know.
Did you say favorite books?
Yeah, favorite books like through different
Oh
stages.
gosh,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Like super young, rem- I don't really remember. But uh, I got into Roald Dahl a lot in elementary
Okay.
school.
Okay.
I remember it was actually a school related book, but I remember reading Johnny Tremaine in middle school and just being so immersed in that world. Like really just I don't know, I could taste the things that they were eating and I could be, and I felt for the characters and I just felt like I was there. And then there was also elementary school, Island of the Blue Dolphins, was a big one for me. And then in high school, I got into the Dragonlance series, and Ray Bradbury and stuff. And then like as an adult, I was like, oh, I I have to like work and stuff. Like I don't have time to read anymore. So I don't read as much, but I miss it.
I don't either. And now the stuff that I do read tends to be like based on stuff that I need to read. So like
Yeah, I read a lot of nonfiction now. I
yes,
just read
yes.
Crucial Conversations, which by the way is an amazing book. If you have difficulty in conversation, like especially when somebody disagrees with you or things are heated or whatever, Crucial Conversations is a really, really good book about how to have difficult conversations in a way that is respectful to both people.
Oh, okay, okay. I've been trying to get through in the best way possible. Like I absolutely adore the book, but it's been taking me a while because of how little time I have. But the psychology of the Legend of Zelda, which our awesome Dr. Bean wrote, is phenomenal. But so like every time I get to sit down and read a chapter, I'm like, oh, it's so delicious. But it's not one of those like like just for fun reads. I love the Red Rising series, but that's probably the only thing I've been able to really,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, oh my gosh. So I had to do that little diverging
No, I'm glad you
little
did. It's nice to find somebody else who used to love to read and struggles to now.
the baby. Did you do the whole Babysitters Club, or like that was never your jam?
I didn't really get into that. Like I tried a little bit, but I got a little into the Nancy Drew stuff, but I don't know.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so it sounds like you had supportive family and resources even though like you didn't necessarily have friends. Is that right? Do you think that helped?
That sounds so sad.
It sounds like when I put it like, but I say that in the sense of like I didn't really have friends either, so it's in the best way possible. You develop the really good friends that are meant to be there later on in life, I think. So
Yeah. I had a lot of family support, but I think this was actually, it accelerated my diagnosis, if not, contributed to it.
mm-hmm.
In between seventh and eighth grade, my mom got in an accident with a drunk driver,
Oh
and
my
it was
goodness.
really serious. And a couple of her friends died, and she was seriously injured. And it was really difficult for our family. It changed things. There wasn't neither driver had insurance, and so suddenly we were hurting financially, and we couldn't go to our private school anymore. So we had to switch schools. So the whatever social support I did have,
Mm-hmm.
I lost. Although if I'm honest, there was a little bit of me going, "Cool, I get to start over," because like everybody at this school thinks I'm weird. Like maybe I'll be
Right.
cool. But still, anybody that I knew, that structure was gone. And my mom was, we traded out our couch for a hospital bed. And, my dad kind of emotionally checked out in a lot of ways because it was
Wow.
really difficult for him to handle. Because he was a fixer. He always, was able to fix things, and this was something he couldn't fix. And so he kind of checked out. He stayed, but he was really emotionally distant. And so suddenly I didn't have the support that I had before. And I think that that's a lot of why I started struggling too, was just all of a sudden, we were going through something difficult emotionally with our family. And just, there was, I'd lost my friends and my school, and like, had to start over and a new school without any support from my parents really. So that was difficult.
Do you feel like in a way ADHD becomes like a very like like we find solace in it. In some sense it's like a little bit of a coping, like parts of it can become a coping mechanism, like just the I hope I can like voice that properly, but I mean, like I remember as a kid the fact that I got easily distracted I like used to my advantage, because I would be in upsetting situations at home, and I would just like just kind of like totally dedicate myself to this new thing and then
Yeah, I think I
switch.
did. You
Yeah.
know, the whole hyper focus thing. Like I would find something that I was interested in, and I would just pour myself into that.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
The Sims comes to mind. The video game The Sims. I was
Right.
so into that in high school.
So I say I use coping mechanism incorrectly, but yeah, you got what I mean in the end. So that's what
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
matters. So what were some of your favorite resources back then, and then like how do you feel like they've changed and evolved over the years? Like what you have used to kind of help yourself get through, and like all the life hacks and stuff. I mean, obviously you put together a whole YouTube channel based on kind of these life hacks that you need to get around what goes on in our brain with ADHD.
Right.
But like how what kind of resources did you used to use, and like how has that evolved? And
So when I was diagnosed, it was pretty quick after I was diagnosed that they were like, okay, well, you know, there's Ritalin, and my mom's like, yes, please, whatever, like
mm-hmm.
give her something, and I took it, and I remember feeling like suddenly I could, like, all the effort I was already putting in paid off. Like I could actually function in a way that I couldn't before. And it felt like putting on glasses for the first time and realizing I could focus, you know, I could see things there. Like, oh my God, is this what everybody else is getting to experience? Because like, I've been struggling hard to like pay attention and get my homework done and remember things. And suddenly there was this tool that could help me do all of that. And it felt kind of magical to me. And I think that it was so effective for me so quickly that I don't think anybody really thought of me needing any other kinds of support. So I didn't really have any other resources.
Mm-hmm.
I just had this pill that I knew could help me function.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that ended up being a blessing and a curse because you know, on the one hand it was great and effective, and on the other hand I didn't get taught skills and strategies, and you know, I didn't get therapy for it. I didn't get a lot of the things that I could have used to support me. And so I only had this one tool. And so later on in life, if I ran out of my medication or I forgot to make another appointment, or like there was one time where I had a boyfriend tell me like, oh, you don't need that, like, you know, negative side effects of medication or whatever. And like I went off of it for 2 years and I had no other way of coping, like at all, because that was my only tool. So back then that was my only tool. That was my only resource, was my psychiatrist. And now I've got like, yeah, I've got this whole toolbox, and I've got a therapist, and, you know, and I've got all these websites. I've got like, I mean, now I have like mental health professionals and researchers that I can call and be like, hey, you know,
yeah,
what do you know about this? So now I have all the resources, but at the time I had nothing. And I was going to a psychiatrist for 20 years for medication, and not one of them even suggested anything else. So that's something that I'm hoping to change.
Oh, that's fascinating. Do you feel like therapy what role has therapy really played in being part of that toolbox?
So therapy, I just went back to therapy a little bit ago, and it's helping me rebuild my self-esteem. I think that ADHD takes a real toll on people's self-esteem, and you know, their willingness to speak up for themselves and their needs in relationships, and to be, you know, to ask for people to treat them with respect, because a lot of the time we don't necessarily feel like we deserve that respect, because we say we're going to do something and then we don't do it, or, you know, we invite somebody to go somewhere with us and then we realize like, you know, our car's a mess, and so we're like throwing into the back seat and like, oh, you know, hang on, let me make space for you. Or they come over and you know, you're not prepared. And I think just so many little incidents like that, or so many little corrections that we get, you know, in class of like, oh, did you space out? Like, oh, you know, you can't sit still. There's just all these little tiny things that over time kind of erode your self-confidence and make you feel like you're somehow less than, or deserving of less respect than other people. You know, you kind of learn to, at least I did, I learned to laugh it off. I learned to, you know, yeah, that's me, messy Jessie, or like I'm ditzy, or yeah, I'm klutzy, or whatever. But there's just these little things that take their toll. And so I'm learning to rebuild my self-esteem is a big thing that I'm doing in therapy.
My gosh, that speaks to me on like 14 different levels. I totally get that because it's how do we? Oh my gosh. So how do you not? I mean, I'm hearing there's a lot of pain obviously behind having a like any mental health related diagnosis and how it affects your life. And do you feel like do you ever feel like you used it as like a way to define yourself? Do you ever feel like it was something that was yeah, I guess that's
I
the
did in a
question.
way, yeah. So when I was diagnosed, I remember, like, again, it was a very dark time in my life. Things were difficult, but my aunt, she was my favorite aunt, the one who also got diagnosed. So when I got diagnosed, I was like, I have ADHD too. Like, I have what she has. I felt like I got to join a cool club. So I kind of, I did. It made me feel special. It made me feel different. I was, there was the kid at class that had this and that, and oh, they, I don't know, whatever, played the trombone, and I had ADHD. It was like a defining characteristic. I didn't really understand what it meant at the time, but I knew that it was something that made me different. And now it's something where somebody actually commented about a year or two into my channel, oh well, like, are you, are you just ADHD? Does that ADHD just like affect your whole
I
life? Like,
can't roll my eyes far enough into the back of my head over that
no, you
one.
understand. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, and I thought about it, and for a second, I was like, oh my God, am I seeing everything through this ADHD filter, and am I making it a bigger part of me than it actually is? And then what I realized is like, well, no, I mean, ADHD is like, it's my operating system. It affects every aspect of my life because every
I
aspect
love
of my
that.
life,
I love
is
that.
affected by it. But that doesn't mean, like, my ADHD makes me, get really interested in things and then get bored of them really quickly. And then now I'm really interested in this, and now I'm bored of this. But the things that I'm interested in, that's not my ADHD, like, not everybody with ADHD is going to be into the things that I'm into. But there is a commonality there. A lot of us bounce around from hobby to hobby, because novelty and interest and stimulation and all of that it's exciting for us. It gives our brains the dopamine it needs. So yeah, it is something that at this point, having done all the research that I've done and doing the channel as long as I have, like, I can't not see my life. I can't see myself without that ADHD filter because it does color so much of my experience. But I'm starting to add back in other facets, and this is something that I got from Dr. B, the idea that we have all these different facets of ourselves. And so I'm building up those other facets now. Like, cool, now I know that I have ADHD. That's a big part of who I am. Like, what else am I? What else?
Right.
What do I enjoy? All these other things. Like, what are all these other things about me?
I think we also live in a world where, especially when it comes to content, where you are kind of shoehorned into like one label. Like that's what's comfortable. That's how all of the algorithms work, right? If you
Yeah.
do multiple things, like a Twitter algorithm doesn't really know where to place you. Like, okay, do I show you other people who have ADHD, or do I show you other people who are bloggers, or do I show you other people who are YouTubers? Like, what? I
Right.
don't know which one to put you into. And so I feel like our brains automatically go into that as well because everything else is so categorized by that. And I actually had a friend ask me, she's like, how could you, um, I spend so much of my life trying to, she described, spend so much of my life trying to think about how I don't have depression and like not think about that and distract myself from it. So how do you go in and day out, like talk about it? And that's all you see. Isn't that difficult? And I was like, I exactly like you're describing, like I stopped for a second, I thought about it, and I was like, but it's a lot. It's not the only thing about me, but it is a lot of what I see. And I love what you said about it's the operating system. Like that's exactly it. It's the main thing that's running, and then everything else kind of has to be put around it. It's the hard drive around, and then everything else is plugged into the computer after.
Yeah, I'm running all these different programs. I'm not the same person. Like, if you've met one
Right.
person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. We don't even all have the same impairments,
Right.
but there are a lot of similarities.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it so much. I did this connecting. I don't mean I love. Anyway, we're good.
No,
We're
I know. I get it.
good. I've been really great about, for some reason, not being properly expressing myself today. So I appreciate you rolling with the punches.
You
Um,
make sense to me.
okay. Well, it's a you can finish my sentence in your head because you're already running 40 miles an hour ahead of me. It's good. It's good. This is great. So tell us a little bit more about the channel in general. Like, how did you come? So you created it because you were looking for kind of to dump a place to create a dump for toolbox, a dump for resources, a space that was a toolbox. So if that's how it started, I mean, like we all know, content creation is not easy. So what kept you going, and what, I guess, what is the bigger purpose of it, and yeah, what does it become?
What kept me going is like I made it public in case it was helpful for anybody else. And there was a YouTuber that put out like one video when I was starting to do the channel. I found somebody named Just Jen, and she had done this episode where she had talked openly about her ADHD and kind of like with an attitude, which I am not capable of. I can't do the attitude thing, but I was so impressed with hers. But everybody in the comments was like, "Oh my God, like this was so helpful to hear it," and all that. That I was like, I think this might be helpful to other people too. So I made it public, and the comments that I got are honestly what kept me going because, other people were finding it useful, so I was like, "Oh, cool, that's nice. Like I'll keep doing it." But B, like I was finding my people. Like all my life, I had felt kind of less than in comparison to the people around me because they could do things that seemed so easy for them that were so difficult for me. And suddenly here were other people that were struggling with the same things I was struggling with. But what was even cooler than that is I got to see how little that actually matters when it comes to how valuable a person is, because they were struggling with these things too. And suddenly I'm like, oh, well, I wouldn't care if somebody didn't message me back right away or was 5 minutes late to coffee if they had all these interesting things to talk about when they got there, And so all the things that I was beating myself up over suddenly seemed a lot less significant, in terms of just being a valuable person than I had felt when I was comparing myself to people who were neurotypical.
Oh my gosh, I
And
love
that
that.
was neat, like finding that community. And the more I learned and the more I shared, the more I realized like nobody knows this. Like we're all walking around with this diagnosis.
Right.
Some of us haven't even gotten the diagnosis yet, not understanding how our brains work at all. And meanwhile, researchers and medical professionals, like they have all this information, and those of us living with this condition don't have it. Like that's bullshit.
Right. Right.
I don't know if I can say that on your stream. I have a family friendly channel, but it's
Yeah, we're kind of we're teen friendly, so you could say, like, I think it's like one curse word, but so that's
okay.
it. That's you
So
run.
that's it.
You
I'm
you,
cut off
you
now.
censored yourself. You're fine. You're fine. You're
But
fine.
it's just it's not right. And I think that there's I've just always had this sense of like justice and like things need to be right and fair in the world. And I was like, it's not right that there are these things that all of these people know that the people who need to know it don't know. And so that's my goal. My goal is to basically disseminate the scientific information we have available so that we can use it in our lives, so that we don't end up blaming ourselves or calling ourselves lazy or dumb or irresponsible for things that science knows why our brains work this way, and it's not our fault. It is our responsibility, right, to learn how to manage these things,
Right.
but it's not our fault that we struggle with them. And so I'm just really passionate about educating people so that we stop beating ourselves up for things that we actually should be really proud of ourselves for working to overcome.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. That's the whole concept of like overcoming and giving yourself credit for the fact that you're overcoming is still a very, very difficult one for me because it
Yeah.
seems like, hey, I should be on level with everybody else. And
Right.
the fact that I have to catch up a little bit before I can even get there, like, oh, that doesn't matter because
Yeah.
because I already should be there. So everything else that I'm doing above and beyond that, like that's normal. That's what where I should be. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
exactly. And then there's even this idea of we should be able to overcome our mental health conditions completely,
Oh
and
yeah.
eventually be normal or whatever, when it's like, no, I mean, I need to learn how to cope well enough that I can have a fulfilling life. But like, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm never going to be the kind of person who can wipe down my baseboards and like remember to do things like change filters on a regular basis or whatever. Like, this is just not, it's so much effort that it's not worth it. Like I need to focus on what I'm good at and then hire people to do the stuff I'm not good at, because there's just a lot of stuff that I am always going to struggle with, you know? So I think that there's a kind of an important balancing act between accepting yourself as you are and like working to grow, because growth mindset is a thing, and there's a lot that we can do and there's a lot that we can improve, but also just being willing to meet ourselves where we're at and not waiting until we're some better, more together version of ourselves to be able to enjoy life.
Where do you think that middle is? What do you think you can when it comes to like any, I guess, mental health condition, right? Because they're invisible illnesses, so it's very easy to say to someone like, just think over it and think through it harder. So where do you feel like that line is, maybe specifically for ADHD, and like, this is the thing that I just like can't do it, and that's the line, and this is okay. And then there are things that like, no, I should be pushing through that, I should be pushing against it, and I can figure this out.
First of all, don't try and fix everything at once. I've learned that's not a good idea. But Rick Green from Totally ADD had a really cool way of putting it, which is like, look at what one aspect of your life, or aspect of your ADHD is causing you the most problems. Like where, what's getting in your way the most in terms of the life you want to have, and work on that. And not try and do everything, and recognize I'm working on that right now. Like I'm working on that. And so I'm not going to beat myself up over every other little thing that I'm doing wrong, because that's not what I'm working on right now. And then other than that, like, I like to think of it as like a GPS. Like you have to meet yourself where you're at. You have to start where you are if you're going to figure out how to get to where you want to go. That doesn't mean you're not going to go anywhere. You don't like put in, like, I'm accepting that I'm depressed in your GPS and then be like, now I'm staying there. Right?
right.
But you have to recognize that that's where you are. You can't be somewhere you're not. And it's, if you try to do that, then you make choices that don't make sense, that aren't going to get you from where you are to where you want to go. And so I think it's, for me personally, it's been about going, okay, this is who I am. These are the things that I'm good at. This is what I struggle with. This is what I want to accomplish. Like, what's getting in my way? Let's see if I can push at those things. And, have a certain amount of responsibility to other people. Like,
sure.
I'm trying to respect my limits and not overcommit to everything. That's going moderately well.
I feel that.
I'm sure you have no idea what I'm talking about, Em.
No, I have all the understanding of just yeah. I like that you described it as like, I just have a moderate amount of success with it, because that's exactly what it is. There's a point with a lot of things that are specifically ADHD related that I've just been like, no, damn it, I want to work through this one. I'm gonna really work through this one, and then like, you meet me a week later and I'm like, I'm not working through that one. It is what it is. A big one for me is I have a very hard time not just like blurting and like talking over people. That is the hardest. And with just like doing enough interviews and learning how to pay attention properly when somebody's speaking and it's waiting for your turn to talk, like eventually it's gotten to be a muscle. But that is something that, like, there are some episodes where I will get so excited that I just will talk over somebody, and then I literally have to go and like spend the next 20 minutes forgiving myself after the episode,
Yeah.
And that's exactly like, it's a moderate amount of success of saying like, I just do this thing, I'm very aware of it, I'm working on it, I'm not working on it today, it sucks, it sucks, I can't do it.
Yeah, I have a funny story about that. So this woman emailed me, and I'm sure she was exasperated, but she emailed me and she was like, can you do an episode explaining to my husband how rude it is that he talks over me during our conversations? And I emailed her back and I was like, I'll do an episode explaining to you why that happened.
Ooh, snap. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's because great.
I'm over it. I'm over being shamed about my condition. I'm over other people being shamed for their condition,
Yeah. And the rudeness aspect of it is very interesting, especially because like I've explained, intent, meaning like it's really because I'm very excited to talk to you. Like you're probably saying something that I'm connecting with really well, and then that makes me really want to, continue the conversation with you, and I'm super engaged. Like it's really a compliment, I swear. But that's a tough one. But that was one that, like, when I received the diagnosis, that was the one that, like, as I was answering questions, that was the one that had asked, like, do you often blurt out answers and you feel like you can't hold back? And I remember looking at like the four options that are like often, somewhat often, and just being like, is there like one I can fill out like over here? Like past.
Were you that kid in class? Like, me,
yeah,
like me.
Yeah, no, I got it. You don't have to finish your sentence. I got it. I know. Yeah, I know what you're gonna say. Oh, that's not what you were going to say. Okay, but I have an explanation for you anyway. Yeah. And I try to be very sweet because I know especially people who are introverted have a harder time being talked over because they feel like, you know, it's a very personal thing. So
Right.
it's a tough one to especially because I interview a lot of people with different mental health conditions. So like you have to be conscious and you can't just let loose with all the ADHD you want.
Yeah, and there are strategies like you
Yes.
can train your friends to like recognize like if I'm going like this, it means that I have something that I really want to say, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna wait for you to finish your thing.
Yeah.
But that way, you know, if they're launching into a 20-minute monologue, they can like recognize I'm gonna have a hard time paying attention to anything that they're saying if I don't get to say the thing that I'm trying to say.
Right. That and I have notepads all over my desk. That see, like you don't know what that means, but they're notes for me. They tell me something.
What is it?
Well, that tells me that I need to not forget to talk about that I was just added to a mixer team, and that is the minute of the quote that I want to post later on YouTube. But like, if
I would write that, and I would never remember what that was. Like, I have to give myself detailed notes if I'm gonna remember.
Oh no, it's all short. It's all just a bunch of short. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, I don't even know why you put the effort to write that because I don't know what that is. But oftentimes it's just super short because I don't want to also seem like I'm not paying attention to the person. But if I don't write it down, it's gone, and then I get upset and I beat myself up over.
Oh, so you just wrote it down during the thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's good for doing while you're doing work too. It's called a parking lot, where like if you can talk in your head while you're working and you're like, oh, I got to do this thing, instead of like stopping what you're doing and doing the thing and trying to get back into what you're doing, you just write it in the parking lot, and that's like your thought parking lot. And then when you're done with whatever you're doing, then you can go visit the parking lot.
The funny thing is that it's like this is one of those coping strategies that I created before I ever knew I had ADHD, or that what I was doing potentially was like maybe like the fact that I was everywhere and my thoughts were everywhere maybe wasn't like a neurotypical thing. This was just like, I just started doing this because I wouldn't beat myself up later so much. And then it became like an explanation for like, oh no, you've been trying to, like, I've been trying to kind of mediate for stuff that I knew I wasn't doing on everybody's level as much as, you know, as much as I wished I could. So my next question to you is, do you ever get frustrated? Because I do ever get frustrated with people who you feel like could be doing more to help themselves. I hope that makes sense. Like, so okay.
Yeah, I do. And it can be really difficult. And I try to remind myself that a lot of it's, you know, a brain chemistry thing, and you know, everybody's got different levels of challenges. And so there were times with my ex where I was just like, I've got strategies that would help you, but you're not using them. And I'd be really frustrated with it. Right. And I had to remind myself, like, the strategies that work for me are not necessarily going to work for somebody else with ADHD because their brain works differently. But B, like, you know, part of having ADHD a lot of times is like, you don't take well to the things that other people tell you should be doing. There's some oppositional defiance there. There's, you know, sometimes it's just like you have to figure it out yourself, you know, and you have to be invested in that change yourself. But yeah, over the years, I've had friends with struggle really hard with ADHD or things like depression, and depression is particularly hard for me because, you know, like with ADHD, a lot of times people are clearly trying, and they're trying like 15 different things at the same time, and they're not particularly well, but like you can see the action. And then I've dated guys or had friends, people with depression, where it just seemed like they weren't taking any action. They weren't trying to help themselves at all. And it felt like it completely fell to me to try and pull them out of their depression or to help them or whatever. And that's something I'm working on in therapy too, is letting other people have their struggles and not taking them on completely myself, because I've noticed that's when I really have a hard time with it is when I feel some sort of responsibility for helping them or making them okay. And like, I'll get frustrated with them for not working as hard at making themselves okay as I'm trying to make them okay.
Yeah.
But really that's a boundaries issue on my part, is I realize I'm overstepping my boundaries and trying to take responsibility for them. Yeah. And yeah, so yes. And at the same time, like, it's something that I work on. Like, everybody's on their own journey, and some people aren't ready to take the steps that they need to take yet, but they're gearing up to it. And you can't know that from the outside. You just don't know.
Right. Yeah. That's, I ask because that's, I mean, that's a similar answer that I've given to people, but that is something that I struggle with a lot too. And at the end of the day, like, we can want to help people as much as possible. And we're not like worser people for wanting to help people. But if somebody's not ready to take a step, it's just not yours to take. It just isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. There's only so much we can do.
Yeah. It's a tough one. So I'm going to open it up to, we had so many questions pop in, so I am excited to answer them. Guys, just so you know, it is one question at a time. Once you see that it says next up, that means your question is being answered next. And then you can insert another question, but I will obviously cap them at a certain point because Jessica needs to go to sleep, you guys. And like, she has other things to do.
I have so many things to do. I'm like, sleep.
Sleep. You're like, now that'll be the 14th thing that I do. Okay, so
it's early.
It's for now. For you don't know how many questions we have. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so I'm opening them and not at all. This pause is totally normal. Okay, so the first question is from PX Abstraction. Have you had issues reading with your ADHD? I've wanted to be a reader, but I've never been able to focus long enough to read anything of note without getting very drowsy. Do you have any strategies?
Yeah, as a kid I didn't have this issue, but as an adult I do. If I go to read at night, because I'm like, avoid the blue light and technology at night, and I'll just read before bed, and like I read like 2 sentences and I'm asleep. So yeah, there are a couple of things that I do. One is I will walk and read. Like I'll read and just walk around my apartment. But the other thing is audio books are amazing.
I can't do audiobooks. I'm so sorry. I can't do audio. No, because I'll start listening and then my brain goes, yeah, and then what am I having for dinner? Like I can't. I've reread passages that I heard in an audiobooks and I feel like, wow, this is so new. And then I'll like hear a quote that read a quote that I'm like, oh no, I definitely heard this before. My husband listens to audiobooks and we'll read the same book, but he'll listen to it and I will read it. And so like I'll be in the car and I'll hear the passage and then I'll be reading and be like, wow, this is so fascinating. This is the first time I'm getting this information. So
that's funny. Well, there's something I don't do this a lot because I think it's a little pricey because you have to buy like the audiobook and the Kindle version or whatever. And I think you get a discount or something. But the most amazing experience that I had reading recently was, I think it's called Whisper Sync or something. It's, you go back and forth from audio to reading. So you can sit and read, but then if you get bored or you want to get up and pace or you have to get in the car and go somewhere, you can switch it to, from right where you were at, you can switch it to the audio version. Wow. And then switch back to your Kindle version. That was amazing. I wish that I had that for everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's twice the price because I know there's a discount, but I think it's still like, cause you still pay.
It's a little pricey, yeah.
Yeah, it ends up being,
but I like
so
that. Worth it. It was so cool. It was like a splurge, but it was so cool.
Yeah, no, it depends on the book. Like, you can't do that for every book, but like, again, if it's one of the books in the series that I love,
Yeah. The other thing that I'll do is I'll highlight. Like, if I've just accepted that I'm going to spill something on a book, like, because it helps me if I've got something to fidget with, or like if I'll have baby carrots and hummus or something while I'm reading.
Yes, that helps a lot. Just something in your hands.
Personally, I've accepted that my books are not going to be pristine. They are going to be well loved. Yeah. And I'm probably going to forget them outside and they're going to get rained on. And like I'm going to do my best, but like my books are just not going to be pristine. And I'm okay with that. And I had a point and I don't remember the point.
That's fine. That's fine. It's a good point. It is.
Oh, that's what it was. Like, I'll make little notes or I'll highlight passages that I really like in the book. And then like sometimes I'll put the date that I wrote it. And then like if I come back and read that book later, I'll be like, oh, at this date, like this passage meant a lot to me. Or like I made this little note to myself and it's kind of cool.
Yeah. And
but I have to engage in it some way.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Kindle makes that a little bit harder, but I have started highlighting just like stuff that I know I like when it's, digital. Um, so having been, next question is from Duo. So having been diagnosed for 20 plus years, the everyday things are under control, but for really bad acute hits, how do you handle those?
Can you read the question again?
Okay. So having been diagnosed for 20 plus years, the everyday things are under control, but for really bad acute hits, how do you handle those?
Um, really bad acute hits. Okay. The first thing that I do personally, if I notice that I'm having a bad ADHD day, is go, some days the ADHD wins. And the whatever limited energy I have that day, I put toward rescheduling shit. Like I put toward like going, okay, I'm not going to get as much done today. Like when am I going to be able to get it done? And I'll pay attention to rearranging my schedule. And there's just a lot of acceptance with that. I think, or I'll if I can't do that, I'll surround myself with more strategies. If I know that I'm going to have like really stressful events coming up, I will meditate. I will make sure to meditate every day. I will like go out of my way to make sure I'm making it to the gym or whatever, like all the other strategies that I have in place. Like if I know I'm going to have a hard time, then I'll do that. If like it just hits me that day, then if I can reschedule stuff, I will. If not, I'll lean on my support system and be like, hey, can I body double? Like I cannot focus for the life of me today, like help. Or I'll play games with myself. Like if I know I need to clean my house, but I just don't want to, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to set a timer and clean whatever I can in this room for 5 minutes. And when the timer goes off, like whatever I'm doing, if I'm in the middle of washing a dish, whatever, I put it down and go to the next room. Like I have a lot of strategies that I can use now if I have to, but whenever I can, I'll just accept it. I'll be like, some days are going to be harder days. And like, I'm going to let myself have that. Like I might need a break because I'm not good at taking breaks. So sometimes if I'm having a bad ADHD day, it means that I need a break.
I love that so much. So you kind of briefly touched upon a bunch, but actually, can we go back and talk about, so what are your kind of go-to, what is in your toolbox right now, just like in general? What are your go-to things that you, maybe we can't use the
things
word
I try and do on a regular basis?
Yes.
Okay. So right now, because this changes quite a bit. This evolves.
Of course.
Constantly. But right now what I'm doing is I'm meditating and I'm going to the gym and I'm going to yoga. I am also like time blocking. Like today I was really overwhelmed. I was like, I've got so much to do. And it was like to the point where I'm like, I'm going to do nothing because I don't understand how this is possible. So I'm just going to do something completely different and watch Frasier. So I called a friend and I was like, hey, I'm struggling. And then realized what the problem was is I felt like I had to do all of these things, but if I don't block out my time, I feel like I have to do all of them at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
And my brain understandably freaks out because that's not possible. And so by time blocking, I'm like, okay, I only have this many hours in a day. I'm going to do this from this time to this time. I'm going to be doing this time to this time. And if I run out of blocks, guess what? That's not getting done that day. And like, I have to figure out how to move it to the next day. But sometimes it's a reality check in terms of like, oh, I actually can't get all this stuff done. And sometimes it's a reality check in that like, oh, I'm just feeling overwhelmed because I feel like I have to do it all at the same time. But once I actually put it in blocks, I have time to get all this done. I will be okay. So time blocking is really helpful for me. Let's see what else. Like, I don't create alone. So I'm working on this huge talk. It's a 45-minute talk for the University of Iowa.
Wow.
And I ask for help. Like on a regular basis, I ask for help. I recognize what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and I ask for help when I can. So I am paying somebody to help me with this talk in terms of like structure, and they're going to edit it for me. And that way I can focus on the content and I can put all my heart into it or whatever, but I know that it will get done. And so that's helping with my anxiety levels. And it's also keeping me on track because, I have somebody to be accountable to. I make sure that I include accountability into my days whenever I can, because working for yourself,
Yeah, that's
you'd be like, oh yeah, on Twitter, I'm working so hard. And then you're just like eating ice cream and doing nothing else, just like lounging on the couch, like, and nobody knows. So I try and create accountability too. That's another big one. And meds. I take meds.
When you have to. Yeah.
I take meds.
Do you regularly? Do you take something?
I regularly take meds. Yeah, okay. I was having to ration them for a little bit because like I thought my insurance was on auto pay and it was not on auto pay. And
Oh,
so I was rationing my meds for a while and that was rough. But finally I was like, I've got talks to do. I've got conferences. I've got all this stuff to do. Like, I'm going to pay out of pocket for my meds. So I did. And usually I will take my meds every day, except for occasionally I'll be like, I've been working really hard. I'm going to give myself a break. Like, I'm going to take the day off of meds and just lounge around and do nothing. Because when I take my
you need
meds,
to do that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you need to do that. Absolutely. I have to ask. So you're doing these conferences. Your TEDx is pretty famous, and so all of this. So I have to ask because I suffer from this pretty. I feel like acutely. Do you deal with imposter syndrome, especially as somebody? So I don't think you're necessarily your background isn't academic, right? So
No, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I dealt with it so much when I started.
Okay.
So much. Like
Yeah.
for the first few months of my channel, I was like, I really hope that like people who need this get to see it, and I really hope that nobody who actually knows what they're talking about sees it and tells me that I don't know what I'm talking about and I have to shut the whole thing down. Because I think at that point I was so vulnerable and so like insecure about it that if somebody had said like, oh no, you don't have a degree, you should not be talking about mental health, I would have been like, okay, and like crawled back into my little corner and like filled in waiting tables. But no, actually, the first mental health professional I talked to was Dr. B at the AFK room at Take This, and he was like, I was so enthusiastic talking to him about it, and he was so encouraging. And still made sure like, okay, you're not giving therapy online or whatever, right? You're not actually giving people direct personal advice. And I was like, no, I'm learning strategies and I'm sharing what I learn. And he's like, okay. And I
I
was like,
could
wait, that's okay? Like, it's okay that I'm doing that? That's awesome.
I could cry because and I think I literally had the conversation with him where I asked him that for the 14th time, like whether I was doing was okay. And I think his exact words were, and this was totally unrelated, and this was like a bunch of months ago, where he was like, you, and if you haven't seen the channel, How to ADHD, you and Jessica both have the same exact strategy. And I've told her the same exact thing. As long as you're not sitting there and trying to diagnose anybody or telling them what they should be doing, you're fine. And I
Yeah.
remember standing and looking up to him because there's no other way to talk to this man. You're standing
Yeah.
like this, and just being like, okay. I mean, this gentleman clearly knows what he's talking about, so I'm gonna walk away. And for the next 10 minutes, I won't have imposter syndrome. This is okay.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, it happens slowly over time that you realize,
Okay,
what you're talking about. And what really helped me actually was taking a peer support training class and
okay.
realizing that there is a value to being somebody with lived experience, sharing your experience, and that you don't have to be a mental health professional. You don't have to have a doctorate to be able to be helpful to people. So I think
Mm-hmm.
my imposter syndrome for a long time came from I don't have the qualifications to do what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's because I thought that in order to talk about this stuff, you had to be an expert and, have this doctorate or whatever. But there actually is a lot of value in just being somebody with ADHD, talking about how it affects you and like strategies you've learned. And that's valuable in a different way. And so that helped a lot. So, you know, um, I think I'll still have imposter syndrome a little bit around things that people are asking me to do that I haven't done before. Like, I'm going to give a talk to a
Yeah.
college about how to be successful, and I was not successful in college. Like, I dropped out. And so there's a little bit of that there, but I'm going, the way I deal with it is I don't pretend I know stuff I don't know. And so I'm admitting in the talk, like, I was not successful in college. I can teach you how to be unsuccessful in college, but then I connected with my community and heard what they had to say about ways that they were successful. And so I'll share those. But I think, yeah, for me personally, that helps with the imposter syndrome is going, I don't know what I don't know, and being okay with that.
But it also sounds like a lot of reframing. So instead of focusing on I don't know these things, therefore I shouldn't be talking about them, saying, well, these are the things I know and these are the things that I do talk about, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then being willing to say, because I don't know if you deal with this, Em, but like sometimes people come to you with this problem and you want to like be able to answer it,
Yeah.
but sometimes you have to go, you know what, that's not something that I can help
Yeah.
you with, but
Yeah.
here's a resource, like
Yep.
here's, this is something that'd be good for you to talk to your doctor about or whatever, rather than feeling the pressure to have all the answers. Like, instead of feeling like if I'm gonna say I help people, I have to help all the people with all the things. Go, I'm gonna help in the way that I can help.
Yeah.
You know.
I think it also comes from like I compare myself a lot to people, to like others, and one of the things that I will do is the downward comparison can hit you and be just as harmful as the upward comparison. So I will look at somebody and be like, that is not how you mental health advocate. Oh my goodness, like that is so, what they're doing is maybe harmful, or that's definitely not a good way to go about it. Like I understand why they're doing it, but oh, just the cringe. And then I immediately go, oh my God, I might be doing that. What if somebody's going to come to me and finally be like, you've been doing this the whole time, you ding dong, stop. And then I'll just be so wrecked because I will be like, what did I do for 2 years? But these are made up scenarios. This is more anxiety talking than anything else. But yeah, so welcome to like a made up scenario and then my reaction to it. And then rational me looking at the whole thing and being like, what? None of that makes sense, girl. Anyway, so
and this is why CBT exists.
Yes. Oh my God. CBT, and then repeatedly, like when I need refreshers, I have a workbook that I work in, and I see a therapist regularly too. But like in between all of that, okay. So Jinx Luck, I will return to the questions, and I'm sorry I'm holding you up a little bit later, but this has been so good. So not really a question, says Jinx Luckless, and I lost it. Okay, here it is. Not really a question, but I wanted to say I love How to ADHD channel, and I also walked and read and got good grades, so I wasn't diagnosed until I was in college in my late 20s. I didn't get medicated until last year, and I'm 38, and it changed my life for the better. Massive change.
Aw.
Yeah.
Was there a question?
Yeah, no, I think it was just a comment.
That was just really sweet.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. So this random gentleman, Dr. B_Seattle, asks, what is the best way for friends and family to support those who struggle with ADHD?
Learn about it. Like hands down, learn about it, because a lot of times, things that we do, there's a perfectly logical explanation for that's neurotypical that is completely wrong when you have ADHD. Like, oh, they didn't do the thing again, they must not care, or whatever. And it's just like, meanwhile inside we're like, oh God, I forgot to do the thing, like, and at work feeling terrible about it, and meanwhile they're like, they were lazy or they didn't care. Right. Or like, yeah, the lazy thing, like, oh, you're procrastinating, you must be lazy, you don't want to do it, when really a lot of the time it's an executive function thing.
Yep.
Like, I know that I need to get started on this thing, but to me it looks like a giant block.
Yep.
And I'm like down here trying to figure out how to get up here, whereas a neurotypical person might see the side with stairs and be like, oh, I just climb the stairs, and I'm like, I have no idea how to get up there.
Right. This just looks like that, and I don't even want to start. Yeah.
And then the motivational challenges. Dr. Russell Barkley talks about ADHD as a motivation deficit disorder. I've got an episode coming out that's going to talk about that, like how to get from wanting to do a thing or intending to do a thing to actually getting it done. There's this it's usually bridged by motivation. There's this motivation bridge, and most people have enough motivation if it's important enough to them, and all that to be able to get over that bridge. But ADHDers have a lot of planks missing on motivation bridge. Important doesn't give us as many planks. We're motivated by different things. We're motivated by proximity, like how soon is this, how close is this, like is it within my line of sight right now, and motivated by things that provide stimulation, that give us the dopamine that we need to function. So things that are exciting and new and novel and urgent and of personal interest, like that's always going to get more of a response and more of our attention than something that we know is important. And it's not even just about it's important to somebody that cares about us or that we care about. It's like, even if it's important to us, we have a hard time with that. And so I feel like the more we learn about how ADHD actually works, the more we can understand how to work with the other person's brain. And Dr. Ari Tuckman just put out a book called ADHD After Dark that talks about ADHD and relationships and sex and all that. And he talks about one of the biggest predictors of relationship satisfaction and even sexual satisfaction for ADHDers, in relationships where one person has ADHD and the other one doesn't, is how well that ADHD is understood and managed, either by the person with ADHD or the partner. Mm-hmm. So the more you understand and the more you can support your ADHD partner, the better your relationship's going to be. So
it's beautiful. Though I can't get over that bridge metaphor though. That's amazing. So it's not even I also feel like not only are there planks missing, but there's also like there's just roadblocks to motivation. Like there's a toll booth and then like some random, yeah, some like random giant crack or something like that. Like just
Yeah.
there's a lot of other stuff that like getting over that bridge is just like it's a huge
Yeah.
ordeal. It's not
And the
just
more we
driving.
fail at it, the more we build up. There's another metaphor that's actually, it's the main video on my channel now, called Wall of Awful. Um, we fail at something enough and we build up this giant wall of awful around it. So like maybe all I need to do is call and ask about reinstating my health insurance, but it is so hard for me to do it, even if I do have the motivation, because I've got all these bricks of failure and anxiety and disappointment and shame built up, that I have to climb that wall before I can even pick up the phone.
Right. Oh my gosh, this speaks to me on like 40 different levels. It's awesome. Potassium asks, do you get tunnel vision when you do something you enjoy? And if so, what makes you realize that tunnel vision happened?
Yeah, it's hyperfocus. It's an aspect of ADHD. If something stimulates your brain enough and you get into it, it can be really difficult to pull yourself away, because ADHD is not actually a deficit of attention. It's difficulty regulating attention. So sometimes I get distracted by everything, and sometimes like I won't notice if my dog is barking right next to me because I'm so into what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the question? What was the rest of the question?
The question is, how do you recognize you have tunnel vision so you could get out of it?
Oh, so I mean, at some point, I'll recognize like, oh, I haven't eaten or showered in days. At some point, it will come to my consciousness that that's happened. Or if I know I'm going to be doing something that's likely with, like, I know if something's incredibly interesting to me, if it's something new, if it's a video game that's going to have like a lot of little dopamine hits or whatever, then I'll set a timer ahead of time so that'll break me out of it. If it's somebody else that isn't hyper focused, like it can be helpful to like gently place a hand on their shoulder, like bring them out slowly. But what I will do is, usually if I recognize that I'm in hyper focus, it's difficult for me to go straight from a hyper focus to doing something else that I need to do. Right. Like it's really hard to be like, oh, I'm going to go from video games to doing homework. So I will usually personally put in a buffer of like, okay, I recognize that this is what I'm doing. In 5 minutes, I will stop. And then in 5 minutes after that, I will go on to this other thing. Because if I try to go straight from something that I'm focused on to something that I'm not, like, that's just not going to happen. That transition is just too difficult for me personally.
Oh, I like that a lot. No, you're teaching me so many coping strategies you don't even know.
Yay!
Or repeating them and just just putting them at the top of the brain. Okay, just 3 more questions and you will be released. This
is cool. Like, I'm reading the chat, by the way. I know we're not really responding to the chat, but I'm reading all the messages. It's
yeah,
really cool.
It is really neat, and you could see like people like connecting with you instantly. I love you. I love you, everybody who's in here. Thank you so much for being here. Ojara asks, could you explain the difference between being obsessed with something and being hyper focused on it with ADHD?
That's an interesting question. I don't know how to answer that, because I think that it looks like obsession sometimes. Like if I'm hyper focused on something and I'm like, dead to the world, like, playing Stardew Valley for 12 hours straight or something, it looks like an obsession. But I don't really know how to answer that, because to me they're kind of one and the same. Because hyperfocus isn't for me just while I'm actually doing the thing. Like I would hyperfocus on my channel when I first started.
Right.
And sometimes that would look like I'd be waiting tables and I would be taking people's order, but in the back of my head, I'm still thinking about the channel.
It hurts so much.
My focus on that.
Yeah.
And so, that can look like obsession, I guess. Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, but like, I mean, I guess, somebody said hyperfocus will pass. So hyperfocus tends to be like, I use it personally as like, this is a session, versus like, I guess if I'm obsessed with something, like I'll end up in hyperfocus with it many times over the course of the month or year or whatever.
Right. Dr. Crocodile asks, does having ADHD make it somewhat difficult to care for animal friends and or pets?
Yeah, so my dog is trained. Uh, she's wonderful. Like having a dog has been great for my ADHD because, you know,
They pull you out of it.
they pull you. Yeah, so she'll like if I don't feed her, she will bring me her bowl and drop it at my feet. Um, if she wants attention, she will let me know.
Yeah.
It's great. Um, it there are times where I'm just like, oh right, like I have an animal that I should play with. But for the most part, like yeah, she's just learned that she needs to get my attention when she needs something, and um, having a routine with my dog has helped me stay in a routine better because I know that she knows when it's time to go to bed and we're going to bed.
Same.
She
Yeah.
knows when it's time to get up and we're getting up. And she knows when it's time for a walk and we'll go for a walk for the most part. But like it's it's a little bit challenging, but I've had a dog for like gosh, between her and my other dog, I've had dogs for like 17 years, and it's been one of the best things for my ADHD because like that dealing with sensitivity to rejection, that kind of thing, like it stings so hard when I'm like, oh man, I messed up again and now this person's disappointed in me, and just having a dog to cuddle with is like so helpful.
Oh my god, it's like I'm talking to myself. I've just been enjoying this because you've been finishing. Like a normal problem is that I try to finish guest sentences, but you've been finishing my sentences as I think of stuff. So this has been really cool. But like this is all happening up here, so you can't tell. Jinx asks the last question. This time I have a question. My significant other knows I have ADHD and is really good about it. In fact, he helps me out a lot, but it really hurts his feelings that I talk over him so much. Any tips on how I can cut that out? Jinx, you weren't here like a few minutes ago, I think. But yes, any tips on how I can cut that out?
No, I think they were there while we were talking about it, but we didn't talk too many strategies. So I've heard different strategies. One is I have a friend who says that she'll do this with her fingers. So like if she thinks of something, she'll put it on her finger like this,
Oh.
and then if she thinks of another thing, she'll actually attach that in her mind palace or whatever to the next finger. And if her friends notice she's like this, they're like, okay, you have things to say, like go ahead. Or yeah, the
Wow.
strategies like writing it down like M does, where it's like, I mean, I've done that. Like
Yeah.
if I'm talking to a friend and I think of something, I'm just like, oh, wait 1 second, I have something I want to share. And it can feel a little bit rude to people sometimes, but I think I think it usually goes over better because they can tell that you're trying to be respectful and
Right.
listen to them.
Right.
I will explain to people personally, like I'm doing this because I want to be able to fully listen to you. And
Right.
so if I get this, if I'm trying to hold on to it in my brain because I
Yeah.
know I'll forget it,
Right.
and it feels really important to me right now because that's
Right.
the other thing with ADHD, like
Right.
everything's important,
It's
right? Like we're
very
not great
important.
for
Yes. Yes.
if we thought of it, it's important. There's no like, oh, that's fine. It's okay not to mention. It's like, no, I have to say the thing. So usually I've noticed that people respond fairly well if you're like, oh, hang on, I just need to write this down so that then I can fully pay attention to you.
So yeah, I like that. So you're saying, hey, I'm working through this thing with you while you're here. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Or somebody says, if you want to be more obvious about it, I have another friend who does this.
Oh, like really? Like, hey, I have something to
Like,
say.
I have something to say or whatever. But yeah, I mean, if there's a way that you can come up with,
I literally raise my hand too. I'll be like,
yeah,
and
like,
then I'll like do this. Like I'm being
yeah.
quiet.
Right. Either way, I think it's helpful to respect both people's needs. ADHDers have a need to like say something before they forget it, and then other people have a need to like not be interrupted. So going, okay, like how can we get both of these needs met?
Yeah, because I think for a long time I started telling myself, it's not important. What you want to say is not important. Just forget it. And then that would be tough because then in my brain I'm going, forget it, forget it, forget it, forget it.
Right. For me personally, I need to get it out of my brain somehow. I need to, I need to like make a note for myself so that I don't stress and I can be more present.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Do you
'Cause
have
that's the thing, right? With ADHD, like it looks like you're not present when you are, and
Yes.
it looks like you are present when you're
when
not,
you're not?
right?
Yeah.
Like if you focus on like, oh yeah, like being completely present in somebody's conversation, like a lot of times in your back of your head, you're like, nope, don't say that, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. Whereas if you're like, you know, you do the distracted looking thing and like, oh, hang on, let me write this down real quick. Like that's actually, you know, and that comes back to why I think it's so important to educate yourself on your ADHD and educate, you know, for other people to educate themselves on it as well, because then you don't misinterpret stuff so much.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. You are absolutely a delight, and you're so smart and so knowledgeable and so like so passionate about what you know, and that comes through in every minute of conversation with you, and I just wanted to thank you so so much. Do you
That's
have
so sweet. Thank you, Em. And
do,
thank you everybody for questions. Those were really good questions.
she needs a mixer channel. Oh man. Oh man. But you guys don't
Oh,
forget our YouTube. It's here. It's here.
yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely don't need another project right now.
Can we have a part two? I know, and I think, yeah, I don't see why not. I'm absolutely in love with you, so absolutely, nothing on my end would stop that. But yes, absolutely. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Do you have any closing remarks? Anything that you want to make sure that people maybe with ADHD understand, and can like maybe feel better about, or something like that?
Yeah. So another one is, so if you guys look at my channel, there's a lot of videos with a lot of strategies or whatever. I think it's really important for us to remember that, first of all, like we do have a tendency generally to want to do everything at the same time.
Mm.
Don't do that. Like these have been like over the course of years, I've collected these strategies and tried them out and incorporated them. And even I don't do all the strategies that I talk about on my channel, because some of them ended up working out well for me and some of them, you know, ended up not, but work for other people or whatever. Like figure out what works for you, but also recognize that your ADHD makes it more difficult for you to implement strategies. So, you know, if somebody's like, oh, why don't you just make lists? It's like, okay, cool, because I make them and then I lose them. Like,
Yeah.
why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do, like, we all have these strategies, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, same way with depression. Like, oh, just,
Yeah.
you know, just go for a run every day. It's like, yeah,
Yeah, just get out of bed. Right.
hard to do that though.
Right, right.
Like, you know, be aware of that. Be aware of the fact that the ADHD itself can get in the way of implementing strategies for your ADHD. And so just be really forgiving with yourself with that.
Oh, the forgiving yourself part is another one where I have moderate success.
Yeah. And the last thing, this is the last thing I'll say. If a strategy doesn't work for you, it might not be you. It can be just the compatibility between
Yes.
you and the strategy.
Yes.
You know, like I always used to blame myself if a conversation didn't go well, if a strategy didn't work. It was always like user error and I'm the user. And then I would forget like there were two parties involved. You know,
Right.
there was another person in that conversation. Somebody made this piece of software that didn't work for me. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a bad person or a failure. Like maybe that piece of software isn't right for me or whatever.
Right.
Just recognizing that, you know, just take some of the blame off yourself, you know?
Right. Right.
Some of it is stuff that your brain is built that way.
Yeah.
And that's how you are. And some of it is, you know, not everything's going to work for you. But just if you can go through life with kind of a curiosity. And so instead of like, why the hell did I do that? You go,
Right.
why the hell did I do that?
Right.
Like, you know, why didn't this work for me? Why didn't it work for me? You know, cultivating that kind of mindful, curious mindset, I think is really helpful.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh my gosh. Awesome. 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 Everybody says thank you. Thank you so very much. I, of course, third, fourth, and fifth that notion. It was absolutely a delight to have you on. I cannot wait to have you back already, but I hope to meet you in person one day and just like give you a big
Wait, we
old
haven't
hug.
met in person? I feel like that's so weird. I feel like we've met.
Really?
Yeah. No, we haven't met in person, have
I
we?
don't think. Wait, because I'm sitting here now going.
No,
No, we
haven't.
haven't. I don't think we have. I think we've been around the same places at the same time, but I don't think we've ever met.
That's so funny.
Are
You're
you-
one of those people that it feels like I just have known forever.
Oh, that's really awesome. Are you going to PAX East by any chance?
Where and when?
That's in Boston. It's at the end of February.
I don't know.
Okay.
How
All
do I
right.
know?
I just threw it out there in case maybe, but yeah, okay. All right. We don't have a date planned for the hug yet. That's okay. But thank you again so much for being on, everybody. We will be right back, so please do stick around. And
Hi guys, thank you so much.
Yay.
Thank you for coming and all the great questions.
Oh.
All right. Bye. Bye, Rain.